This What's Working with Cam Marston podcast is brought to you courtesy of First Horizon Bank.
Hi, I'm Tabitha Scott, a human dynamics expert and the host of Bucket Listening, brought to you by First Horizon Bank. I hope you will join me as I sit down with people from all walks of life to learn how their passions, insights, and persistence have helped them turn their bucket list into a beautiful life.
Tune in on your preferred platform or visit firsthorizon.com/podcast.
We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. As always, thank you so much for joining in on this show. We're trying to bring you workplace, workforce, and marketplace trends so that you can understand them, apply to them to your own business, your own world, and get just a little bit better at whatever it is that you do. We try to uncover guests who can give insights on things that will help us understand what's going on around us. And I must admit, one of the recent shows we had, the guest was on there. His name was Shashank Rao. And he told me something that struck a chord in me that has really changed my behavior, frankly, and has made me a little bit better at some of the things that I do. And I'll give you the example. One of the things Shashank said in his episode of What's Working is that when we're online and we're shopping and it says less than 10 remaining, there's some sign next to the product that we're looking for. And it's intended to give us some urgency to buy. So 2 remaining, 5 remaining, we think we better get it before somebody else does. And we click and we own this product now. The number of returns that occur as a result of us rushing to buy a product thinking that it will be gone is extraordinarily higher than other products we buy that we don't feel rushed. His point was, we get this thing in, and then we have a little bit of buyer's remorse. We have a little bit of guilt about rushing to buy it. We didn't give it full consideration. We didn't explore it enough. We didn't decide perhaps if we wanted enough. And ultimately, we will return more products that we buy under urgency due to the sign online that says less than 10 remaining or whatever it may be. So the question then goes to the seller of whether that sign next to their product is worth the effort if they're going to get a great number more returns than they normally would. So I look at it, of course, from the consumer side of when I see something like this, do I typically hurry up to buy it? And I do. I absolutely do. And probably, like the averages say, send much of it back that I shouldn't. And I remember I had some podcast equipment for this show that I bought for that exact same reason, or under that same circumstance of these microphones are almost gone. You better buy them now. And I boxed them up and sent them back because they didn't serve the purpose of the show. So these are the types of ideas I hope to generate from the conversations of the guests. Again, little things that'll make each of us a little bit better at whatever it is that we do. Upcoming after the break, you're going to meet Joe Calloway. Joe's been a colleague of mine, I guess a contact of mine for years. He's a great speaker. He's an author. I'll go through the number of books that he has. He's a consultant to many organizations. He sits on the board for a couple of organizations. He has a capability of simply boiling things down to their essence, such that it's easy for you and me to understand and apply to our world. And it was, and I've mentioned this on the show before, it was a post that he did on LinkedIn. I encourage you to follow him on LinkedIn if you don't. His name is Joe Calloway. And he posts these very thoughtful things. And the day that I reached out to him to be on the show was the day that I saw his post that was a coffee mug, and perhaps it was pre-created art, whatever it's called, clip art or something like that. But the coffee mug simply had the word begin on it, begin. And I thought, that's such a challenge of mine, is to get up and begin and to get my mind in the right mindset to attack and to proceed and to move forward. So today I'm going to get Joe on the show. We're going to talk to him about what he meant by begin, but I'm going to also talk to him on his insights around customer service, leadership, He's really a thoughtful guy in the business world. Like I said, an old friend, a colleague, and boils things down to their essence. So when we come back from break, I'll have Joe Calloway. And before the show ends here in a little while, I'll tell you this new guest we've secured based on a speech that I saw last week, which was phenomenal. Dr. Robbie Pearl. Oh my gosh, never seen a speaker as good as him, and he's agreed to be on the show. You're listening to What's Working. We'll be right back with Joe Calloway.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. I promised a good show today, and I'm going to deliver. Joe Calloway is on the other side of a Zoom call from me, from his home, if I remember correctly, Joe, in Nashville, Tennessee. Joe is a consultant. He's an author. He's a business observationalist. That's one of the words that I've coined, of a guy that's simply able to spot things and boil them down to their essences for people like you and me to listen to and to act upon. I'll read off a couple of his book titles. The top of the list here, Becoming a Category of One, The Leadership Mindset, Indispensable. I remember when that one came out, Joe. That was great. And Be the Best at What Matters Most. There are a number of others. We'll go through them throughout the show. Joe, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to What's Working.
Thank you for having me, Cam. I've been looking forward to this. This is I've always liked you. I like your work, and I like what we're going to be talking about. So this is fun.
I've described you as a business observationalist, which means a whole lot of nothing, but a guy that's able to sense things going on in the marketplace and boil them down to their very essences. Tell us, Joe, a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're doing today, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, for 35 plus years, I was a speaker, a business speaker. And it's interesting that you say business observationalist because, Cam, there were a lot of times that I would open with a business audience by saying, think of me as a reporter. My job is to see what's going on in the world of business, and more importantly, see what's working, and then bring that information and those ideas to people with my perspective added to it in a way that they could use it.
So you're providing insights to you're reading the newspaper, if you will. You're reading the headlines to the audiences that you stand in front of and are interpreting the events out there in such a way that they can best understand them. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite pieces of feedback, a CEO told me one time, he said, I feel like our whole group, and these were executives, he said, I feel like everybody in the room was having this sense of, they were nodding their heads saying, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I understand it. I can use this. I can do this stuff. And so that's a big part of what I did. Now I kind of do the same thing, but it's in a much more consultative role. It'll be a lot of one-on-one with executives or small executive groups.
Did you, the coffee mug that I'm referring to, you told me was your own coffee mug that just simply has Begin on it. I thought it was professional clip art or something like that. You've got it. But it seems to me that a guy with the motivation and the background and the perspective you have wouldn't need a coffee mug that simply reads begin. And I want to be frank with you. I was refreshed to learn just a moment ago that that's your mug, that you had it made, because that's a challenge that so much of us have. And a guy with your pedigree, your background, your activity struggles or needs a simple sign on a coffee mug to begin. Tell me about that.
There's an old saying that we teach best what we most need to learn.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty good I do a lot of things. I've tried a lot of things. But boy, I'm also really good at overthinking. Man, I know that turf inside and out. Just thinking an idea to death. But I'm very aware of that. And so I work really hard at beginning and moving on with things. And there are different pieces that I think go into that. But yeah, I do need a constant reminder it's like, Joe, giddy up, go.
Yeah.
Put this idea out there.
So what is your obstacle to beginning? And perhaps I told you this, Joe, as I invited you to be a part of this show, and I forget who told me this. Oh, I know who it was. It was Beverly. She's a friend of mine. She said every morning we wake up and at the foot of our bed is sloth and fear. And the first thing we got to do is get past sloth and fear. And it's not waiting in the kitchen. It's not waiting in the car on the commute to work. It's at the foot of the bed. And you got to push through that every day. It's kind of part of beginning. And I say this, Joe, because there's so many, I feel like, there are people like me, and I don't know you well enough to say, but there are people like me that are listeners out there that kind of want to know that the final chapter of their business career is going to matter.
Yeah.
And I sat around and I drank beer with a guy not long ago, and he had just resigned, took a buyout from his company, and I said, "So, Rob, what are you going to do next?" And he said, "I don't know, but it's going to matter." And I feel like that's a chapter that those of us in our mid-50s are getting into right now, but we are afraid to get back to your coffee mug to begin. Can you expand on that for me?
I think I think your friend really hit it with sloth and fear. I think fear is a huge factor. I think the biggest fear is the fear of what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
So what we do is we say, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to just run off and do this willy-nilly. I'm going to get everything completely in line so that there's a 99.9% chance that this thing's going to work. And I'm not going to launch anything until I've done all the groundwork. And we do that and do that and do that. And then either the opportunity disappears because we've just waited too long, or we run out of steam on it because we've overthought it. There's an old saying that a friend of mine, Artie Malham, very successful entrepreneur, and he actually ended up writing a book with this title. God, I love this idea so much. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing wrong.
I love it. There's a lot that's being said in that title, isn't it?
I'm telling you, chew on that for a minute. Because, and to capsulize the thought there, the way Arnie puts it, he says, look, do it wrong, and then do it better.
Yeah.
I've worked with tons of startups. I was fortunate enough to be the entrepreneur in residence for Belmont University here in Nashville, their Center for Entrepreneurship. And so I worked with mostly college seniors. This wasn't a class project. This was actually their business.
Oh, I see.
Either them by themselves or a pair of them, whatever. This was a real business that a lot of them had already started or were about to start. And the thing that I can safely say about all of them that I worked with, some of whom went on to really, really great success with their businesses is that to some degree, they did it wrong. And the other thing, Cam, is we say, well, I want to be certain that I know exactly what direction I'm going to go and what it's going to look like. Okay, fine. Get to that point as quickly as you can. And please know that once you get started, you are probably going to change direction because you're going to get information from the marketplace.
Yeah. I had a couple of business consultants on here about 18 months, maybe 2 years ago, who said it's amazing the number of businesses who end up doing exactly what they had no idea they'd be doing.
Yes.
That they get started and the market shows them something different. And Joe, when we come back from break, I want to get further into this and talk to you about how you make teams comfortable with uncertainty. But before break, I want to remind my listeners about First Horizon's Bucket Listening podcast. It's targeting CEOs, C-level decision makers, and it's about why wait till the end to seek your bucket list? Why wait till you're retired? Why don't you make your career, your life, your business a part of your bucket list? They interview CEOs, they interview C-level people to talk about these things. First Horizon has produced a great product. If you want to be inspired and motivated, find Bucket Listening on your favorite podcast app, brought to you by First Horizon Bank. When we come back from break, more with Joe Calloway. I'm Cam Marston. You're listening to Customer service never goes out of style. In fact, I think it's safe to say that customer service is more valuable and more important now more than ever. Hi, this is Cam Marston. One thing that my over 200 episodes of What's Working has taught me is how important customer service is to building and maintaining a thriving business. It's the growing need for customer service that's led me to partner with one of the state's leading customer service trainers to create our program called Delivering 5-Star Customer Service. Your team will get one 90-minute training session per month for 6 consecutive months. Each session builds on the skills learned the previous month, allowing your customer-facing teams to practice before moving on to the next lesson. And the 6 lessons address everything from appearance to electronic communications to conflict resolution to maintaining a service mindset. Our program travels and is delivered in person at your workplace, nothing virtual. You simply can't practice the level of the skills this course teaches virtually. For more information, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's schedule a time to talk. Remember, you have less to fear from outside competition than you do from discourtesy and bad service from inside your own company. Again, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's talk about your business. Joe Calloway is sitting on the other side of a Zoom call from me. One of his book titles is Work Like You're Showing Off. Another of his book titles, I mentioned it in the previous segment, is Indispensable. Be what best at whatever matters most. Keep it simple. Magnetic, the art of attracting business. Joe is a business consultant and can see things more clearly, in my opinion, than the rest of us. And Joe, prior to break, we're talking about uncertainty. We're talking about wanting to have everything lined up perfectly so failure is not an option. We talk about beginning, as your coffee cup says, but sometimes you're leading a team. My listeners are generally leaders of small and sometimes large teams. Their companies are sometimes small, but I've been surprised at the number of people who I know that are with Fortune 500s that manage teams that listen to this show looking for ideas. So let's speak to them real quick. Everybody wants certainty. I think it's a human nature is to want certainty and predictability, but fear and uncertainty are a part of being alive. How do we galvanize a team to embrace fear and uncertainty as they proceed into something they don't know what they're doing?
Well, that's a culture issue. And I think possibly a leader's primary responsibility may be to be the leader in building and protecting and reinforcing a culture. And part of that culture can be look, we do things. I mean, word it however it resonates with you and with the team. There are people that say we go fast and we break stuff. That's who we are. That's what we do. There are people that say, my gosh, there's the CEO of a bank that I've worked with for years, one of the most successful, rapidly growing banks in the southeastern United States for now. The CEO, brilliant businessman. And in an interview that he did with a business publication, he said, probably about half of what we tried doesn't work. It's a bank, for Pete's sake.
I know. And that surprises me to hear somebody say something like that in a bank, a very predictable environment.
Yeah, they're as responsible as any bank can be as far as being good stewards of their clients and their clients' financials. But he said, no, for us to grow and for us to hit the goals that we've got, we have to try a lot of new ideas. He said, and probably about half of them don't work. And he said it, Cam, it was matter-of-factly.
Yeah.
And so with his team, they say, gee, we're uncertain. We're not positive about this. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
I don't mean do that in an irresponsible way. Of course, they think, they plan, but they realize that you've got to get it out there. There's a million cliches about this. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yes,
to probably quote the most common one.
Right. Let's move that idea a little bit forward. Again, a lot of the listeners here are leaders, and I think they fear. Well, let's take it a couple of ways. Number one, if I'm leading a team and I want to start something and it doesn't work, I'm perhaps afraid of my reputation in the organization. I'm afraid of my promotability. I'm afraid of a bonus. How does this leader of the bank encourage his team to take risks like that and say, hey, trying nothing is worse than trying something and failing?
It's interesting, Cam. I interviewed Joe Scarlett for my book, Becoming a Category 1 Tractor Supply Company. At the time, Joe was the CEO, and he was also went on to be chairman of the board. He's now retired. But I was interviewed. They were the case study for the book. And they had so much top to bottom, side to side buy-in on the culture, the values, and part of that was innovation and trying new things. And I asked him a general question. I said, Joe, how do you get that kind of buy-in organization-wide?
Yeah.
And he said, he thought for a second, he said, the fact is we just talk about this stuff all the time. And I see that thread running through every effective leader, every effective culture, regardless of what the culture is, but certainly a culture of innovation and taking risk and being okay with things not working and looking at it in a way that says it didn't work, but look at the information we got from that.
There's no failure, there's only learning.
Yeah, exactly. But the leader, this sounds like an oversimplification. No, it's just saying it the way it is. You have to talk about that stuff all the time.
Yeah.
When you walk in the room, people need to go, oh my gosh, here comes Cam. He's going to ask us what we're trying.
Right.
Because that's what we're about. So that is absolutely the leader's responsibility to create that kind of cultural attitude.
I have learned, and maybe this was the case prior to COVID, but as I have become aware of it since COVID, is the importance of culture in the organization. And I'll never forget this speaker that I heard out of the Kellogg School of Business named Richard Jolly say, hey, strategy is cheap. You would be amazed by how ChatGPT will generate a strategy for your business in 15 seconds. Yep. What would have taken a full day and a flip charts and everything, it can be done in 15 seconds. But the execution today is dependent upon the culture. And again, perhaps it was the case prior to that. And it is the leader's job post-COVID to do nothing but perpetuate the culture to the point of the leaders saying, yes, I'm getting tired of doing this, but if I stop, the culture will diminish. It's got to be the culture of our strategic advantage is in the culture that I perpetuate day in and day out. And I've had a number of leaders, CEOs, say, I ask them essentially the question, what is your job day in and day out? And they say, to maintain and perpetuate the culture, to protect it. It's never finished. We can't say the culture's cooked. It's done. Let's move on to something else. It's always, because fear and sloth are at the foot of everybody's bed every day, it's the CEO's job to make sure they push through the fear and sloth and try something, that they begin, to go back to that coffee mug, that they begin. What are you seeing, Joe, post-COVID, let's say, about culture? Is my observation that it's become more important post-COVID accurate, or has it always been the case? Give me a sense of my perspective, if you will.
No, it's right on target, Cam. People are starting to get it. For one thing, and I love that you use the word perpetuate, because a lot of people used to look at culture as a project that you would put a check mark by.
Correct.
Okay, I even had, and it happened to be a banker many years ago, pre-COVID, he came up to me after a presentation that I had done, and he said, I like all this culture stuff you're talking about. We got to do that. We need to create a culture. And I laughed. I said, wait a minute, you've got a culture.
You're exactly right.
You can't not have a culture. The question is your culture intentional? Does it help advance your strategy? And is it something that and I'll go back to your word, perpetuate.
Yeah.
Because that's the perfect word. One of the case studies in Be the Best at What Matters Most, my book, was Grunder Landscaping, Marty Grunder, out of Dayton, Ohio, just brilliant businessman who now consults with landscapers all over the country, booming consulting business. He said, and it's in the book, he said, I don't think you're doing a job as a leader until your people start to make fun of you for saying the same thing over and over and over.
I absolutely love that. Until you are entirely predictable and can handle the teasing from your team because they know what you're going to say and what you're going to do, and point that out to them, you've not done your job as a leader. What an interesting barometer of success, that when you walk in the room, the team rolls their eyes and says, he's going to start saying this or she's going to start saying that. So if you're out there listening, ask yourself, is your team making fun of you about what you repeat? I hope for your sake that they do. I'm on the line today with Joe Calloway. He's an author, a consultant, a colleague from way back, getting insights into today's workplace. When we come back, Joe, I want to talk to you about what you see that's vacant, that needs to be addressed. You're listening to What's Working. We'll be right back.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence, but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit, with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. Joe Calloway is an author, he's a speaker, he's a consultant, he's got a background that people like me just admire and want to emulate. He's on the other side of a Zoom call from me right now in his home in Nashville, Tennessee. You're listening to What's Working, by the way, back from break here, working through segment 4 where we get to know the guest a little bit differently. But before we get into those questions, Joe, when you look out over the business landscape today, We've got artificial intelligence, which has been a big conversation on this show recently. We've got a new generation perhaps entering the workplace. We've got this. I had a call from a bank 2 weeks ago saying we still can't get our people to return to work, Cam. What do we do? We've got all these different things, and there's always been different things going on. But give me your read of the landscape right now in business and what perhaps a business leader is missing, opportunity-wise, leadership-wise, management-wise. That's a wide open question. Let me hear what you have to say.
Well, let me give you one that I think not all, but certainly some business leaders are missing. I think we get trapped by, there's a saying that I used to use all the time. I applied it to myself, and it's this. I used to say, Calloway, if you're successful, that means you know what used to work. If I'm successful up to this point, that means looking back at history 2 days ago, a month ago, 2 years ago, way back then, I knew what worked. And that's what made me successful up to now. But now I turn around and look forward, and I better be thinking, what's going to work next? Because, I mean, we've run into the ground because it's true that everything changes, the pace of change is just increasing, all of that, we all know that. But I think it can be a scary, confrontive question to say, how can I put us out of business? Because there are forces out there that want to put us out of business. Sometimes it's the competition. Sometimes it's just changes in technology in where people want to work. There's all sorts of things that could disrupt us. We better disrupt ourselves first, meaning leaders have to be willing to look at what's the next iteration of this organization, of this company. And it's a tough thing to do. It's not easy, Cam, to stay successful and keep improving with what you're doing while at the same time saying, but what are we going to be? What we need to speed up our evolution. Listen, you talk about speeding up. One thing that COVID did, it took a lot of things that were going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
Like remote work. And instead of it taking 10 years, it took a year.
Yeah.
So it speeded up the process on all sorts of changes. But I really do think that's a hole in a lot of leaders' thinking, is they're not thinking enough about what would and could disrupt us and how can we be the ones to do that instead of somebody else doing it to us. So
are you asserting that momentum is the enemy of creativity?
Well, momentum's good. Bill Gates said one time, though, about success, he said success makes smart people stop thinking.
Yeah.
Because it's just human nature to go, this is working. Why would I change it?
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody, but I guarantee you, if I were to go back on the speaking circuit, which I don't do anymore, but if I were to take the speeches I was doing before COVID and go out there and do those same speeches now, people would look at each other and go, I'm sorry, does he know what year this is?
Just got out of a time machine. Yeah.
Stuff gets dated, and I think the biggest threat, one of the biggest threats to everybody that's listening right now to your business is for you to become irrelevant.
Yeah.
If you become irrelevant, it's over.
Yeah.
Relevance is a moving target.
Right. Right.
We constantly have to change. So momentum is a good thing. You should ride momentum for all it's worth. Success can be dangerous, though, because it can be a trap into, and I'm stating the obvious here. We've all heard this, but it really can be a complacency trap.
So it, again, is over to the leader to say, yeah, we're feeling good. We've hit our numbers. We've got a great trajectory. Let's break it. Let's now take this confidence that we've generated by doing things right and make ourselves uncomfortable by figuring out what could go wrong, which is absolutely contrary to most people's bias. It is to find comfort in predictability. And it is that leader's job to make people uncomfortable and make them predict the unpredictable, to disrupt themselves.
Yeah, and to change that old saying a little bit, now what we should be saying is, if it ain't broke, break it and make it better.
Right. What's your next book, Joe? Do you see something post-COVID or in this new economy, whatever we call it, that you just eager to sink your teeth into? Or are you done with book writing?
I don't know. I'm not sure, Cam. I'm always on the lookout. I'm involved in 3 different businesses now, that in addition to the consulting and advisory work I do, and that's taken a lot of my mind space to work with those. I don't know. I don't have a book in mind right now, but I've always got little ideas floating out there, and one of them's going to hook me here sooner or later, and I'll probably come up with another book. Yeah,
I think I don't know who said this, but I quote it frequently. I don't like writing, but I do like having written.
I love having written.
I sure do.
I'm funny. I may be an exception. I love writing. Here's the thing, though. And I'm like a lot of your listeners. The next book that I write, I don't want, and people are always saying, hey, isn't it about time you had another book? It'll be time to write a book when I've got something significant to say.
Yeah.
I don't want to just fill up a bunch of pages.
Right.
I want to say something that will be meaningful to anybody that reads it.
It's at this point in every show, Joe, that we kind of get to know our guests in a different way. I've got 8 questions, and I pick and choose them based on our conversation. Biggest business mistake you've ever made, Joe?
Wow, biggest business mistake. This is a broad answer. It's not an event. I said yes to the wrong clients for way too long.
Yeah.
Meaning I took on the wrong clients longer than I should have.
Yeah.
Because they had a check and they were waving it right in front of me. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. I should have started saying no a lot sooner and narrowed my focus. Now, some people want to broaden their scope. For me, I wish I had narrowed my focus and taken on a narrower niche of clients earlier than I did.
Real quick, you won $500 million in the lottery. What's the first thing you're buying?
Well, the first thing I'm buying, sounds God. I'm such a put it in the barn and make it grow.
It's a unexciting but very good answer.
Well, yeah, and I think the first thing, because we don't need anything, and I'm sure we'd buy something and some stuff, but I think the very first thing would be, and I think a lot of people would answer this, let me take some of this and put it where it can do some immediate good right now for some people.
Yeah.
So it would be, what are some organizations that I can give some of this to that'll do some good? Then I'll buy some stuff.
How can they find you, Joe?
LinkedIn.
I'll put his link in the show notes on the podcast. Joe Calloway, Nashville, Tennessee. Very thoughtful, insightful comments. Thank you so much, Joe.
Pleasure. Thanks a million for having me, Cam.
I'm delighted to have you. Folks, you're going to want to follow him on LinkedIn. It's what generated this call, was that simple picture. We'll be back after this break with segment 5. You're listening to What's Working.
Is paying a real estate agent worth the money? I'm Angelo DiPaola, the Coastal Connection with eXp Realty. Great real estate agents are like the best doctors. They listen deeply, make your goals their own, stay current on trends that impact your decisions, and have experience navigating unexpected situations. We help our clients make the best real estate decisions along the Gulf Coast. Google me, Angelo DiPaola, the Coastal Connection.
listening to What's Working. We're back. I'm Cam Marston. Glad to have you here for segment 5, which is normally the wrap-up recap segment, but I don't typically like saying I told you so, but I told you so. Joe's a great guy, a great message, a reminder of the things that are important. He is well-spoken, powerfully passionate about the business that he studies, the help that he gives, and I don't know. I have to decide this for myself, perhaps. I don't know. So what did he say? He said one of the things he said is the CEO's job is to perpetuate the culture, is to create and perpetuate the culture. And he had that conversation with the one CEO who said, you know what, we need to create a culture in our workplace, in our business. And Joe's reply was, you have a culture. And I've said this on this show before. Anytime two people or more work together, you're going to have a culture. It creates itself. It organically generates. The question is it a culture that's good and supportive for the business? Is it a culture that allows, as we talked about in this episode, risks and, in fact, encourages, champions risks? And when you hear the CEO of a bank, as Joe told the story, say only half the things we try work, you think, wow. You would think with a bank like that, you wouldn't try it unless you knew it would work. It's a conservative and very predictable organization. He stewards his customers' money well, but they try a lot of things that don't work. And it's refreshing, frankly, to hear that story in my ears, because goodness knows I try stuff that doesn't work. I seldom talk about it. You don't go on the air and say, hey, here's the most recent failure I had. I could go on the air and say, hey, here's the recent thing I tried that I'll know not to do again or do differently. Anyway, I told you so. Joe's a great guy, and after we stopped the recording, he gave me a list of 3-4 people that he suggests get on the show, and we'll definitely chase them down. A referral from him on people like that will be very valuable to me. Upcoming, and we don't have this scheduled yet, I told you this as the show began, is I heard perhaps one of the best presentations I've heard in a long, long time last Thursday or last Wednesday, whenever it was, outside of Washington, D.C. I was there to give a presentation just after lunch. They encouraged me to sit through this guy's presentation prior to lunch, and I did, and he was so good. His expertise is hospitals, healthcare, care and treatment of doctors, frankly. And his insight into our healthcare system is remarkable. But more than that, and the reason I want him on the show, not just to talk about healthcare, but is the organization he created that today is known as MAPMG, Mid-Atlantic Permanente Medical Group, and took this disparate group of people all over the place, no direction, no consolidation, and has created a heck of a healthcare organization which consistently hits tops in their patient satisfaction rankings. And I want him to tell that story. It will be a show. Remember me saying this, because when you hear him on the show, you'll know what I'm doing. He's so smart that I don't want to say anything and reveal how unsmart that I am. Give him a lot of leash and let him answer the question so I don't embarrass myself. That's it for us this week. Have a good week, everybody. We'll be back. As you likely know, this show originates as a radio show broadcast across the state of Alabama, and it continues to grow in both radio listeners and market. After it's formatted for radio, we then turn it into this podcast. Please share it with those you think would find it interesting, and subscribe to the podcast on my YouTube page, where you can leave messages and your thoughts and your comments, and I'll certainly get back in touch. Finally, if you're a fan of the show, please offer a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can find my book called What Works on Amazon.com. In it, I highlight the top 10 ideas from the first 200 episodes of the show. Mind you, they're not the top 10 best episodes, they're the top 10 best ideas. Many times the same ideas are brought up again and again by different guests, and we dig into those ideas in such a way that they'll be easily applicable for your business. Simply go to Amazon and enter my name, and you'll find What Works as well as my other books. Chapter titles include How to Find a Niche, Innovation, Building Teams, and so forth. To learn more about the workshops and seminars I offer, go to cammarston.com. There you can view clips of my work, view workshop titles, view my reviews, case studies, customer lists. It's all there. If you'd like a free copy of one of the chapters of my book, enter your email address at the bottom of the homepage at cammarston.com. And from that site, you can email me directly. I always love to hear from you. You'll also find me on social media. Find Cam Marston on all the social media platforms, and you may need to enter the numeral 1. There's one other Cam Marston out there, and that numeral 1 distinguishes me from him from time to time. So if you're unsure if it's me or not, enter that numeral 1 after my name, and it should do the trick. On a more personal and less professional side, I record weekly commentaries that air across Alabama on Alabama Public Radio twice each day on Fridays called Keeping It Real. They've won statewide and national awards. They're simple observations on the world as it goes on around me, and they're only a few minutes long. They're a passion. You can find them on the same podcast app you're using to listen to this. Finally, if you're interested in advertising on this podcast or the radio show, reach out. I've worked hard to cultivate a specific listener, and I can tell you all about them, and I have many different options for helping you reach them. Thanks again for listening. We'll have another episode available soon.